This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. Chronic conditions exist, and they can be very challenging for those of us who are going through them. The treatment, the lifestyle change, all of it. I want to flip it around for just a moment and focus on family members of those going through chronic conditions, the caregivers. There's a lot going on there. And a lot of times you don't know where to turn, even just to talk to somebody. Well, I found her, and she's here, and she's an amazing owner therapist of chronic health counseling. This is what she does. She counsels on how to get through these situations and all different types of conditions and concerns. But today we're going to focus on the caregivers as we bring her in here. She is Angela Espin on the program. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Fantastic. Very happy.
Oh, good.
We're talking about this because I talk with friends, even family members that are supporting others with chronic conditions. It can be a lot that, and these are like the unsung heroes. You don't get credit. They kind of do their thing. Where should we start with that today? What do you feel?
Well, I can start with my own experience. Again, what I noticed with my family members, and then just also places that I've worked and served as a social worker. But what we're finding is it's when somebody gets diagnosed with a medical condition, whether it's type 1 diabetes, cancer, dementia, COVID, right? It's always the medical attention is focused on the person who is sick. And there's the family system that also gets impacted, and that often gets overlooked, especially for parents, caregivers, because they are the ones caring for it, impacted by the person who gets sick and has to care for them in so many ways. So I know for type 1 diabetes, it usually gets diagnosed when the person is young. I've heard as early as 6 months. A little baby that gets diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And from usually when they're children, we can be a little more accepting and go with the flow. Not that it's not difficult, but it's really the focus is on the parent and the caregivers. So if you imagine your little child gets this big life-changing diagnosis, there's the trauma, the anxiety, the worry, the frustration. So the parent takes on all of that anxiety while trying to care for a child and their other children. A lot of times it's not just the person who gets sick, but then there are also one or two, however many other siblings that the parent has to also care for. So there's this dynamic that happens where all the focus gets shifted to the sick child. I know in my family, my brothers later on, as we got older and talking about things, felt somewhat neglected because all the focus was on me and taking care of the diet. Everything became about Angela. So there's that dynamic, but also the stress and the trauma that happens with the parents, because now their child is at risk of dying. It's like walking a fine line. You can't have too much insulin, too little insulin. It's walking a tightrope, and always guessing, not sure what's going on. A lot of change of lifestyle. Also you can't have a lot of sugar in the house. And then the other kids are jealous. Well, why can't we have Coke? I mean, just because she can't. So a lot of those things that go unnoticed really by the medical professionals of all the other dynamics that happens outside of that 10-minute visit every 3 months. So the other thing I noticed, there's this shift that happens, particularly with type 1. That's what I'm most familiar with. A shift that happens, especially during the teenage years. So we all know that becoming a teenager is hard on a good day. You throw in there type 1 diabetes, a need for independence. So there's this control dynamic that happens not just with trying to raise a teenager, but also with the parents starting to let go and letting the child take care of themselves. So there's this, and I've seen different parents do different things. I mean, it's all over from the helicopter parent that does everything for the child, all the way to the other end, which was more of my thing, was hands off. She's going to have to figure this out and become an adult and take care of herself someday. So there's this very, not just with self-care management of insulin, carb ratios, taking care of the blood sugars, exercise, all the things that go into being just okay. There's also that other dynamic that happens not just with teenagers, I would say 14 through college age, and the parents just don't know what to do. I did hear I was in graduate school and someone came in to talk, and she shared a story about a young kid. He was 15 years old, maybe. He was later diagnosed, I think, in his younger teenage years. And so he went out with his friends to see a movie, eating popcorn and drinking a Coke, but didn't take his insulin, and the kid ended up in a coma. So we're talking serious implications of life or death that a child is being, this diagnosis is put on the child. You got to do these things or else, which there's a lot of fear that gets put in, not just to the child, but also the parent, caregiver, of you got to do this perfectly. You got to, it's all about control. And so it's like this omnipresent pressure almost, because then to add on to it, every 3 months as a type 1 diabetic, you have to go to your doctor. And 9 times out of 10, we got to get this under control. Your blood sugar levels are too high. You're going to lose your vision. You're going to lose a leg. So that's a lot of stress to take on, especially for a little one and the parent. So it again creates that dynamic that's not unlike somebody in the household who suffers with substance use disorders. There's the codependency that starts to happen with the sick child, parent, caregiver, and then also the other dynamics that go on with the other children in the home. So when we think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to jump in. I was just going to say, I didn't even consider
Okay.
the dynamics, if we're talking children here to start, the other children in the home. I'm thinking, parent taking care of child. You do anything for your kid, then you worry, if they're not doing the right thing in terms of what they're eating when you're not there, you're not around. I didn't consider the siblings. Like, wow, that just adds like layers and layers of challenge, guilt, and all, right?
Of course, yeah. My older brother, I think I was 7 years old, and and this is back in the day before the continuous glucose meters and the insulin pumps. This was what I call analog diabetes management, even before finger sticks. So it was just very touch and go with diabetes management. And so there was one time I had a severe hypoglycemic episode, the low blood sugar with the seizures, and I was 7 years old and sleeping. And my brother is the one who found me. So there's a trauma for him of seeing his baby sister having seizures and almost dying from this disease. But that never got addressed. Not until I got into my clinical practice and started unpacking some of this. And I talk to my brother sometimes about, I'm like, nobody thought about the impact that happened to you in these traumatic events, or always worrying about your sister. Is she going to be okay? And then also what about me and my needs? Because everything's hyper focused on the sick person. So there's a lot that goes on and I think it also, it impacts the self-care of the patient, right? There's the levels of denial or minimization, don't want to cause too much trouble or distress in the family because we're already taking up a lot of energy just by being sick, having to have extra medical costs. I think the last thing I saw was like $10,000 a year just for diabetes management. So that's a lot of pressure on the caregivers, takes away from other resources from the other children. I mean, that's a vacation right there.
Right.
And again, going just to the simple things like food. Um, I remember my brothers always being upset because there was no sugar in the house. We couldn't have candy in the house. We couldn't have sodas, things like that, because my mom was always protecting me. So yeah, and then
Mm.
so that's another area where the caregivers, and then also I hear often, not just with diabetes, but other issues, adult married couples, and they get into a relationship, everything's fine and hunky dory, and then all of a sudden one person gets sick. And so that leaves the partner maybe having forced into a role that they weren't prepared to do, especially if they're younger, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, before we kind of expect in our 50s and 60s, we start to go downhill. So, so that's another layer of treatment in order to help the family system help each other in healthy ways,
Mm.
because sometimes there's a lot of resentment that builds up. I didn't sign up for this, or just for instance, somebody's sick and the spouse is there to be their caregiver, but then sometimes the resentment and feelings of being taken advantage of, or the sick person manipulating a little bit because of the trauma and trying to get needs met, that just don't know how to effectively communicate those needs to their partner. So that's another area that we take a lot of consideration, and not just spouses and caregivers or family members, but healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, EMTs, firefighters, all those first responders that also, they might go into a call of that 6 or 7 year old child who's having a seizure. And then they're getting, especially first responders, all kinds of trauma that they see all the time, every day. And so, in my opinion, there's no way that that cannot impact us.
Wow.
I did a lot of work. Yeah. Go ahead.
You have opened the door to a lot, a lot
Yeah,
that
it's
we
a
need to,
Pandora's box.
but it's important. And this is a door that many times isn't open to reveal what's going on the other side of the door. I didn't even consider, call it compassion fatigue for
Mm-hmm.
a caregiver, medical professional, first responder. And I've seen it. I've got friends in that field. I am connected to somebody who's a nurse, and she has to take every third day off. And forever, she said, I don't know what it is. I'm so tired. I'm like, don't you realize what's going on here? You're a massive empath. You're feeling it. You're taking the energy on, and it's beating you up, understandably so, where she can't even continue. She got to take time off because it weighs so heavy. And we're giving the example of diabetes. There's so many other things out there too, where it can be challenging for a caregiver. And then you have well, let's look at this. How about this? Caregiver, and you just said, somebody might say to themselves, whether it's a parent or a spouse caring for a spouse or somebody caring for a parent at this time,
Mm-hmm.
what happened to me? Like, I didn't sign up for this. I love and I'm going to help, but I've lost me. I've lost me. How does somebody find themselves again as a caregiver going through caring for somebody with a chronic condition?
Yeah, I run into that a lot. And not just the caregiver compassion fatigue, but for the person, there's a self-care fatigue that happens when you deal with this disease over and over and over. So that's another topic for another day. But the compassion fatigue can be a very big issue, especially when somebody doesn't sign up for it. They lose themselves in caring for their loved one and not taking care of themselves. And I mean gentle care of taking a day off, like your friends, like knowing your boundaries, knowing the limits,
Mm.
knowing when it's okay to call in a nurse. And I see that a lot too with, especially with our older folks, Parkinson's disease, things like that, where the caregiver is just worn down. They're also aging too, so it's it's getting harder and harder. But then a lot of people don't want a caregiver that they don't know coming inside of their home to take care of them, especially if it's intimate kind of needs like showering, bathing, toileting, where they only want their spouse to be the one doing that. So that, again, it creates this tension of feeling trapped, right? No other choice. There's a lot of, for caregivers, there's a lot of guilt that comes about. Guilt with, oh, well, I'm going to go travel and take care of myself. I'm going to leave the spouse home with a caregiver. But then the person goes and does their thing and then carries this guilt with them that's not helpful in filling their cup either. So it's like they're going and doing the things, but their brain is still at home, worrying, concerned, obsessed about their loved one. So there is a lot of that enmeshment and codependency that can come up and happen. So that's where we come in to try to help not just the person, but their caregivers, other siblings in the home that might have other issues or acting out because they're not getting the attention in a unstable environment and things. And then that's just let's just say that's a completely healthy family before a diagnosis happens, whether it's diabetes, cancer, anything with that can happen with little ones. So that's with a healthy family. But then let's consider, oh, well, maybe mom and dad drink too much. Maybe mom and dad are using drugs. Maybe mom and dad are getting a divorce and they're fighting all the time in the home. So, or the person who's sick is causing that rift in the family unit. So then the sick person also can take on the feelings of responsibility that this is my fault that mom and dad aren't getting along. And so not only being sick, but carrying this guilt of this is my fault, right? And with little kids, that's harder because we just, as little ones, we're still learning about life, right? And we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes we don't know how traumatic our childhood can be until we get older and start to look at things a little bit differently. So with my practice, we don't just help the person who's sick, but also the family system. As a licensed clinical social worker, we look at the person in their social environment, not just the person in their mind and brain and their behaviors. So as social workers, that's how we're trained to see how the person is impacted by their families, schools, doctors, and then bigger systems that spill out. And we all know in today's society that ripple effect goes out into a big policy changes when it comes to healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, social programs that might be at stake, all those fears that we're dealing with now with today's political climate.
You are amazing in that you look at every angle. Many don't. And even right down to the family situation. Life is challenging enough without the chronic illness. Now you add that in. Now you add other challenges, maybe mom and dad are fighting, like we said before, maybe one parent feels that they're not being seen or heard. They're not being appreciated. They've kind of lost themselves because they're taking care of somebody who has a chronic illness. There's so many different aspects of this. And we're focusing on the caregiver today. There's so many,
or at least trying to.
I think you're doing a fine job on that. What's your advice? Somebody is caring for somebody else. Doesn't matter the age at this point. Just to maybe three things that somebody should be mindful of before they lose their mind, if you will, in terms of navigating all of this.
Well, first they can call us.
Ask for help. That's number one.
Asking for help. Asking for help. I think letting go of the idea that the caregiver has to do it all, right? That is just impossible.
Yeah.
I recommend, little topical things like going for a 15-minute walk every day with a smile on your face. Actually, there's evidence that going for a 15-minute walk a day has the same impact as taking an antidepressant. It also helps with bilateral stimulation to help the person process whatever is going on in their life by walking or running. So I'm an EMDR trained therapist, so I utilize those things in my practice. But so self-care, going for a walk, the basics, drinking lots of water, eating well, getting some exercise and rest. Those are the self-care is key in any caregiver role, whether it's a therapist. It's actually in our code of ethics to practice self-care. So to be sure to take vacations, hiring caregivers, getting respite care, knowing the limits and boundaries, because the other thing that can happen is the caregiver can get so worn out, so worn down, not have the energy even to be kind to the person that they're caring for. So then it can turn into a toxic situation if the caregiver is burnt out. Even abusive situations can happen as well, which that's why we don't want any of that. So asking for help, talking to friends, building a social network, addressing those basic needs for ourselves. It's when we think about when we go on an airplane and they say, put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then assist others. So because you're right, it's easy to get lost in the care of the other one and lose all aspect of what we do. And I think especially true for mothers who are caring for their sick children. Because there's a lot of responsibility as a mom anyway, and then you're layering on taking care of a sick one.
Yes. But this is what you do, and do it so well in terms of identifying all these things, and certainly ask for help. You need a couple of hours just to go to the park or get your nails done, whatever it might be. We're afraid to ask for help, but people appreciate it when you ask them because they get something out of it. It's not like we're putting them off, like, oh, man, I feel really bad, I'm asking you. Man, most people will say, you need a couple hours, I'll come by, no worries, because it gives them joy that they can give to somebody else because they know that somebody would do it for them. And of course, you're there with Chronic Health Counseling. What's the best way to find you, Angela?
Sure. My direct phone number is the business line. It comes directly to me. That number is 704-517-2106. Or they can visit our website, which is www.chronichealthnc.com. And there's a contact button there as well. Also, my email address is angela@chronichealthnc.com. So that's another way to reach me.
You're a rare breed. There aren't a lot of people on this planet that offer coaching, counseling for chronic illnesses, but certainly for all aspects of it, even the caregiver. So thank you very much for today and all the insight, and lots more to talk about next time we get together. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.